The Silent Watcher Next Door. I'm 27 years old, and I live in a small, quiet town in Ohio. Most people here keep to themselves, but I've always been curious about my surroundings, especially when something doesn't add up. For months, the house next door had been vacant. The family that used to live there packed up and left without a word. It was strange because they seemed happy, at least from what I could tell. Since their departure, no new tenants had moved in, and the place just sat there, dark and empty. Or so I thought. Every now and then, I'd see the porch light flicker on at night. At first, I dismissed it as an electrical issue, but then I started hearing faint noises. Footsteps, the sound of something being dragged. It was always late at night, and I convinced myself it was my imagination. One evening, I was out walking my dog, Bella. We were passing the house when I saw movement in the upstairs window. I froze. There was a man standing there, partially obscured by the curtain. He wasn't moving, just staring out into the street. My stomach tightened, but I managed to lift my hand and wave, trying to be polite. He didn't react. He didn't even flinch. Bella started growling, her ears pinned back. That's when I decided to walk away quickly. I told myself it was probably the landlord checking on the property, but something about the man's stillness unsettled me. The next morning, curiosity got the best of me. I called the landlord, a grumpy older man named Mr. Parker. When I asked him if someone had moved in, his response chilled me. "No one's been in that house since the last family left," he said firmly. I told him about the man I saw, but he laughed it off, saying I must have been mistaken. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept staring at the dark windows of the house next door, waiting for some sign of life. Around 2 a.m., the porch light flickered on again. My heart raced as I heard the faint sound of footsteps inside. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police. I told them everything: the noises, the man in the window, and the landlord's insistence that the house was empty. 2 officers arrived about 20 minutes later. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. They called out, identifying themselves, but the house remained silent. Finally, they forced the door open and stepped inside while I waited anxiously outside. I watched as their flashlights scanned the dark interior of the house. After a few minutes, one of the officers came back out, his expression grim. "Ma'am, can you come here for a second?" he asked. My legs felt like jelly as I followed him to the door. The house smelled musty, like it had been closed up for years. The officer led me to a small room near the back. My heart sank when I saw what was inside. The walls were covered in photographs of me, walking my dog, sitting on my porch, even through my bedroom window. Some of them were recent, taken just days ago. I felt sick. Who did this?" I stammered. The officer shook his head. "We don't know. There's no one here now." As they searched the rest of the house, I noticed something else that made my blood run cold. The photos weren't just of me. There were older ones too, of a teenage girl. I recognized her as the daughter of the previous family who had lived here. Her bright smile in the pictures was now haunting. The officers found a small door in the attic. It led to a hidden space behind the walls. That's where they found her body. She had been missing for months, and now, it was clear why her family had left so abruptly. The sight of the officers carrying out her remains will haunt me forever. As for the man I saw in the window, he was never found. The police said it's possible he was living there without anyone knowing, but they couldn't track him down. Mr. Parker later admitted that he had heard of the daughter's disappearance, but didn't think it was relevant. I've since moved away from that neighborhood. I still lock my doors religiously and keep my curtains drawn at night, but I can't shake the feeling that someone somewhere is watching me. Eyes behind the blinds. I'm Hannah, 25 years old, living alone in a small apartment in Portland, Oregon. It's a quiet neighborhood, mostly older residents, which made me feel safe when I moved here. But what happened recently has left me terrified of the place I once called home. My neighbor, Ms. Dolores, lived directly across from me. She was an older woman who mostly kept to herself. I'd often see her watering her plants or sitting by her window, but she rarely spoke to anyone. What made her stand out was her habit of staring. At night, I'd sometimes catch her peering out of her window, her face partially hidden by the curtains. Her eyes always seemed to be searching for something, or someone. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured it was just an old lady being nosy, as harmless as it was unsettling. But one night, that changed. I forgot to close my blinds before heading to bed, and when I glanced outside, I saw her. Ms. Dolores was standing at her window, but this time, she wasn't just looking around. She was staring directly at me. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and unblinking. Her intense gaze sent a chill down my spine. I quickly shut my blinds and tried to push the image out of my mind, but her expression stuck with me. A few nights later, I woke up around 3 a.m. feeling thirsty. As I walked to the kitchen, I noticed something strange. The front door was slightly open. My heart sank. I was absolutely certain I had locked it before going to bed. I quickly shut and bolted the door, trying to convince myself that maybe I had forgotten. But the feeling of unease lingered. The next day, I couldn't shake the paranoia. I decided to buy a small security camera and install it near the front door. I told myself it was just for peace of mind, nothing more. That night, I locked the door twice and went to bed. The following morning, I checked the footage. What I saw made my stomach drop. At 2:13 a.m., the door slowly creaked open. Ms. Dolores walked in. Her movements were slow and deliberate, almost unnatural. She wandered around my living room, looking through my belongings, but the part that horrified me most was when she stopped in my bedroom doorway. She stood there, motionless, watching me sleep for nearly 5 minutes before turning and silently leaving. My hands were shaking as I called the police. They arrived quickly and went to question Ms. Dolores. What they found still sends shivers down my spine. When they entered her apartment, it was completely silent. After searching, they discovered her body in the basement. She had been dead for over a week, likely murdered. Whoever, or whatever, had been in my apartment that night wasn't Ms. Dolores, and the thought of who else it could have been still keeps me awake at night. Beneath the garden's beauty. My name is Mark, I'm 32 years old, and I live in a small suburban neighborhood in Boise, Idaho. It's a quiet place where everyone knows each other and life is usually peaceful. But what I discovered about my neighbor, Douglas, shattered any sense of security I once had. Douglas lived next door and was known for his perfect garden. His yard was the pride of the neighborhood, roses in full bloom, neatly trimmed hedges, and not a single weed in sight. I'll admit, I envied it. My own yard looked pathetic in comparison, and Douglas always seemed smug about it, constantly outside pruning or fertilizing his plants. One day, while walking my dog, I noticed an awful smell coming from his yard. It wasn't just manure. It was sharp, sour, and made my stomach churn. I casually asked Douglas about it, and he laughed, waving it off as fertilizer. Something about his response felt strange, but I didn't push it. Later that week, my dog, Max, started digging near the edge of Douglas's fence. I tried to pull him away, but he wouldn't stop. When I finally checked what he'd uncovered, my heart froze. It was a severed hand, half decomposed, with dirt still clinging to it. I stumbled back, shaking, and immediately called the police. They arrived within minutes and began digging through Douglas's garden. What they found was horrifying. Several bodies buried beneath his flowers. The officers unearthed bones, skulls, and even fragments of clothing, all hidden beneath his perfectly manicured garden. Douglas was arrested that same evening. The entire neighborhood gathered outside as he was led away in handcuffs. He didn't say a word, just stared straight ahead with a blank expression. The police later told me that during questioning, he refused to explain anything, where the bodies came from or why they were there. But the most chilling part came when I started putting the pieces together. Each victim's disappearance had been reported shortly after they complimented Douglas's garden. He had lured them in, one by one. That's when it hit me. I had admired his roses just days before. I had even told him how incredible they looked. The thought of how close I came to being one of those bodies beneath the flowers makes my skin crawl to this day. I can't look at gardens the same way anymore. And even though Douglas is gone, I can't shake the feeling that someone like him could be living right next door, hiding horrors behind a perfect facade. Thank you for diving into the darkness with Sinister Tales X. If this story sent chills down your spine, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Subscribe and hit the bell icon to never miss a new tale of terror. Until next time, stay safe, and remember, the most sinister tales are often closer than you think.